Hey there, friends. We've talked about pet nutrition before, but this week we're diving into a question many pet parents are asking. How can I get more help in figuring out the right thing for my pet when it comes to nutrition? Well, there's a lot of conflicting advice out there, and figuring out the best diet for your pet's specific needs can really be overwhelming. So today we're going to be talking with Certified Canine Nutritionist Elizabeth Casas, and she's joining us to break it all down and help you decide if personalized guidance is the key to your pet's healthiest life. Stay tuned. You're listening to Starlight Pet Talk, a podcast for pet parents who want the best pet care advice from cat experts, dog trainers, veterinarians, and other top pet professionals who will help you live your very best life with your pets. My guest today, Elizabeth Casas, is a certified canine nutritionist and integrative pet health coach, driven by a passion for empowering pet parents with straightforward, effective solutions for optimal pet wellness. She has expertise spanning nutrition, optimization, and holistic approaches that helps guide pet parents towards measurable success driven by values of integrative wellness, empowered wisdom, and effective simplicity. With certifications from the International Holistic Pet Health Coaching Association and Feed Real Institute, combined with 22 years of corporate experience, Elizabeth helps pets and their pet parents thrive through workshops, coaching services, and speaking engagements. All right, so Elizabeth, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Very happy to be here.
I had mentioned in my teaser of the show that we have talked about nutrition before, but I think it's one of those subjects that you can't talk about enough because it's so important. But why did it become so important to you? How did you get started down this path of becoming a nutrition coach for people?
So I started it's almost 7 years ago. I had my beautiful cat, Lumiere. He's a Berman, and we got him when he was 9 months old. He was supposed to be a show cat. He was the most beautiful cat you have ever seen. And he had always been very healthy. When he was about 4 years old, he started throwing up. He wasn't eating. He was getting dehydrated. He was just under a chair. He wouldn't come out. He was just really sick.
Mm-hmm.
Took him to the vet. They did some blood work. They did some tests, urine samples, and it turns out he had pancreatitis.
Oh,
So
wow.
the veterinarian goes, okay, so keep him in. We're going to give him some fluids because he's highly dehydrated. And then we'll call you later and see how he's doing. So a couple of days passed and they called me and they said, okay, he's eating a little bit. You can go home. We're going to send you with a prescription diet specific for pancreatitis, and then he should be good. So this prescription diet was probably twice as much as any other food, right? But you would do it because it's for you love your animal, and it's the only solution that they give you. They also gave me some nausea medication.
Mm-hmm.
So went back, I did everything they told me to do. He was not great, but he was a little better. He was eating the food begrudgingly. And then maybe a week or two later, he started throwing up again, and he started, having issues and pain, taken back to the vet. Pancreatitis is back.
Huh.
This happened a couple of times. And then the last time he just said he's not getting any better. The only thing we can do is just keep him comfortable until he passes. Unfortunately, there's nothing we can do. My first question is, what did I do? Why does he get pancreatitis? They couldn't give me an answer. And my kids at that time were 8 and 9 years old, and they were, of course, devastated. This is their pet. This is their best friend that they've known forever.
Yeah.
And I've decided to take him out. I'm like, there must be another solution. It cannot be that my cat is going to die at 4 years old. He's too young.
Yeah.
Took him out. I had a friend who's a veterinarian in Colombia, and he believes in food and medicine. It's a combination of the two.
Mm-hmm.
So he told me, just keep the nausea medication, get him some boiled chicken breast so it doesn't have fat, and give him probiotic yogurt to help his gut.
Mm-hmm.
And we did that. And after a week or so, Lumiere was fine again. He had no more issues. After that, I started looking at nutrition, at real food. I found out the reason he had pancreatitis was because the food had a high level of fat. And then I started, you start going into this rabbit hole of looking for things and learning about nutrition. And I started cooking for Lumiere at that time. I then got my puppy, Felipe, who's a rescue, and I always gave him cooked food. there was always the question, am I doing it right? I did a lot of investigation. And then finally, about a few months ago, I decided to get a certification as a holistic pet health coach and a canine
Hmm.
nutritionist. And so that gave me a little bit more of the tools to be able to help my pets, but also I wanted to help other pets because I remember during that time, I didn't know what to do. And so
Yeah.
I wanted to be able to help people and educate and share the knowledge on how to make decisions when your pets need a little bit of help.
Right. Yeah, and there's so much information out there, but it's very hard to know what's right, what's not right. There's so much conflicting information, and I find it shocking sometimes that I mean, I love my veterinarians, and they have, but the go-to thing is put them on a prescription diet, and most of that food, if you look at, I'm sure you have, right? It's not good quality food. It might solve the issue because they've eliminated that one thing that's causing most of the problems, but nutritionally, it's not good food. And like you said, it costs a fortune. And for those of us who have more than one pet, unfortunately, my cats are not picky eaters, so they love eating the prescription diet. And now everybody's eating it, and I'm feeding the whole household this 3 times the amount of regular cat food, and half of them don't need it. It's kind of maddening. And then you just kind of say, what do I do?
Right. And so the thing is, veterinarians are wonderful, but they were never taught about nutrition. You have to understand that their understanding of nutrition came from the sales rep from Hills that said, if you have obesity, get this. If you have pancreatitis, if you have kidney issues, and that's all they know. There's some veterinarians that are starting to learn about nutrition, but there's also people like me and others that are learning about how to make sure that we give a balanced diet. Because
Hmm.
what's very scary is if you look at the back of the food labels, it just sounds very scientific. And it's like, we can't give that. I need to buy the food. I can't make it at home. The
Right.
reality is that it is not that scientific. It is just food is food, it's healthy food. What we eat is what they can eat. There's certain things they can't, but it is not as complicated as people are making it to be. And there's something you said, there's so much information out there that is
Hmm.
conflicting. And what's happening is just becoming very polarizing. It's like you have to eat raw, and the raw eaters say there's nothing better than raw. And then there's the ones who only feed kibble, and veterinarians, you can only feed pet food. And the lightly cooked people, you can lightly cook it. And it becomes this like my way or the highway. When the
Right.
reality is all animals, they're like us, right? Uh,
Right.
Keto doesn't work for me, but it might work for my friends. I might have issues with milk, but my son doesn't have issues with milk. Pets are
Right.
the same. Some of them have more sensitivities than others, but they will thrive in food. I personally give my dog a combination of lightly cooked and raw. Some dogs do very well in only raw, and some dogs don't. So
Hmm.
the key here is to understand what's going to work for my specific pup and feed the dog or cat in front of it, right?
Right. Yeah. And when it comes to pet parent education, and I know I mentioned this to you when we had our conversation before the recording, is that spend a lot of time, at least once a month, sitting at a local pet store with our adoptable pets. And I see people walking out who look like people of means. I know you can't necessarily judge a book by its cover, but look like people of means, or you have a conversation with somebody and they seem relatively intelligent, and then they walk out the door with this bag of garbage over their shoulder. Is it simply that the pet labels are too confusing and so I don't know, or I kind of feel like people don't look like they just go for it's all pet food, it's all approved by blah blah blah, or it says it's nutritious, or it says it's got meat or whatever it is, and so they don't really read the nitty gritty on the label. Like why aren't we doing a better job already? It doesn't seem like it should be that hard.
Well, because it can be confusing, right? And pet food manufacturers are very good at convincing you that the best thing to do is to eat their food. So they put this
Hmm.
really fantastic picture of a cut of meat, and then it says with meat, and you trust it, you believe it. They don't have to tell you many things
Mm.
as long as they're balanced and complete according to AFCA. And it's just confusing. And sometimes I fall under the convenience role, right? We are busy. We have a lot of things around our life. We have work, we have kids, we have families, and it's convenient to grab a bag and serve. A lot of us
Right.
don't even cook for ourselves. So why would we cook for our dog?
Good
So
point.
it's also convenience, right? What I'm trying to help people understand is that it's really not that hard and that you can start with a very little step by step and it would make a big difference to your animal. It really shouldn't be that complicated.
Let's talk about that. So, when Raw started becoming a big thing, I had this beautiful Doberman Pinscher and I wanted to do the best by him. So, and this is how dumb I was back then. So he went from basically eating kibble, a good kibble, as good as kibble can be, and I made him this like completely raw food meal. And of course, he gobbled it down and then proceeded to throw it all back up all over the place. And I said, nope, no raw food for him. It's no good. Obviously, I overdid it and, did too much at the same time. But what are some of those little things? Like if we're either trying to transition to a different way of doing things or just trying to do a little bit better than that bowl of kibble, what are the small changes we could start making?
So there's a wide range of things that you can do. First, learn how to read a label. If you're not willing to move away from kibble, there's better kibble out there. I don't advocate for kibble, but I also don't kibble shame. If you are not ready to change, we're all in different paths in our journey.
Yeah.
Then learn how to read a label and choose the better kind of kibble or not as bad kibble. The ones
Yeah.
that have whole proteins named in the first ingredient, the ones that don't have a lot, that they don't have colors or flavors because they don't really need them and they're not good for your pet. The ones
Mm-hmm.
that have whole ingredients also like for vegetables and different things. Try and look for that.
Yeah.
The second step is just adding something natural to their bowl. I do advocate for 1 tablespoon at a time. Like take out a tablespoon of kibble and
You mean not
bringing
a
it,
whole thing of chicken wings and raw eggs
not a
in one
whole
meal?
thing of chicken now.
Yeah, it
There's
was a huge
also a
mess.
process, right? There's also a process. They are more sensitive than we are.
Yeah.
So just 1 tablespoon at a time of superfoods. So learn what are those superfoods that are going to make a big difference. For example, sardines. I am a fan of sardines. Sardines
Mm.
are at the bottom of the food chain, so they don't have as more mercury as other fish. They're little fish. They have a lot of omega-3 fatty acids, which are fantastic to avoid inflammation. They have CoQ10. They are really one of those superfoods that if you add is not going to hurt them and is
Mm-hmm.
really going to help. What happens is when you add just 1 tablespoon of good food, you're feeding the good bacteria in the gut.
Mm.
What we need to understand is that 70 to 80% of our immune system is in our gut, including our pets. So if you feed that good bacteria, you can go wrong. Like it's going to help, even if you're feeding kibble. It's not going to
Yeah.
make them, it's not going to completely change, but it's going to help their immune system. It's going to help their digestion and the absorption of those nutrients that are so important. The other
Yeah.
superfood you can add is mushrooms. I know some people believe that mushrooms are not good for pets. That couldn't be furthest from the truth. The
Yeah.
mushrooms that are good for humans are good for pets. So it's very easy to know, and the mushrooms that are poisonous for us are going to be poisonous for them.
Right.
Whatever you can get in your supermarket, lion's mane, reishi, any mushroom, it's a
Yeah.
medicinal mushroom. Go ahead.
We actually did a whole episode on
On the
mushrooms
mushroom.
for pets. So if you want to learn more about some of these mushrooms that she's mentioning, make sure you go back and listen to that episode because that was fascinating to me because I feel like I know a lot. I mean, I worked for a vet for 8 years and I, rescue animals and I have a lot of animals and the mushroom thing never crossed my mind until that episode and it was just
Yeah, it's one of those superfoods, right? It has beta glucans, it has adaptogens. Those are fantastic. And just adding maybe less than a tablespoon, you can have 1 teaspoon.
mhm,
Replace it or put on top of their kibble. You do need to saute it so the goodness of the mushroom comes out. That raw mushrooms don't do as good as the sauteed ones. So, it's two little things that you can do already
yeah.
that are starting to help your pet to have a better gut and better immune system, antioxidants. You can add fruits like, blueberries. So
Mm.
just little things like that. That's a good start if you're not ready. A lot of us, we grew up with veterinarians and our parents telling us the dog or the cat should never eat scraps from the table.
People
They can
food. Yeah.
only eat pet food. there's a history of pet food, right?
Mm-hmm.
Dogs and cats existed before pet food, and they've been eating normal food before for 15,000 years or more.
Right.
So it's just a matter of how you do it. So that's the next step. If you want to transition to another food, like, like going to raw or like going to lightly cooked, you have to do that gradually as well, because the acidity in their stomach it's been ready for the amount of carbohydrates that they get from kibble. So when you
Mm-hmm.
move to something like raw or lightly cooked, it's going to be very heavy on their stomach. They usually get diarrhea, they do get gas. So you just start slowly, depending on your dog, until you get to the level where their stomach and their gut is ready to absorb
Mm-hmm.
that type of food. You can go from choose the best kibble to a combination of the two to a slowly transition to fresh food.
Right. I want to go back to what you had just because I want to make this point about the labels, because there was a time where when I was trying to educate myself about the information on the back of the labels and all those monosyllabic words that I had no idea what they meant. And I think anybody out there, I challenge you to go and flip that bag or that can around and literally look up what every single one of those things is. And you're going to be shocked to know what those ingredients are and what else they're used for in this world. And it's not for consumption. So definitely do that. But I want to address like just something as simple as one very common like A versus B ingredient, right? So you've got a dog food that the first ingredient is chicken, and a dog food that the first ingredient is chicken byproduct. There's a lot of
Mm,
people that would look at that and say, chicken, 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 right? It's
yeah.
part of the chicken. Can you just give an example of just something as simple as byproducts? What does that mean? And without getting too gross.
That is a very good point. When you look at the protein, you are bang on. You need to look at one word protein: salmon, meat, pork, byproducts, and meals, because you also get a
Oh
meal,
yeah,
right? A
that's right.
meal
Chicken
is
meal.
it comes from a rendering facility, is a kind of where they put the beaks, the feathers, the bones. There's nothing wrong with that. Like beaks, feathers, and bones is what they ate when they were wolves, and there's nothing wrong with it. The problem with it is the source.
Mm,
Where is this meal coming from to the rendering facility? And
mm,
render facility get the 3D: deceased, dead, and disabled animals, right? And so you don't know that if that meal is coming from a diseased animal, a disabled animal, a dead animal. So there has been some recalls because there's euthanasia chemical in the food, because the dead animals that are euthanized or the roadkill animals, they go to the rendering facility. The same thing with byproduct. It's not turned into a meal, but it's the pieces of the chicken. So it's the beak, it's the feathers. Again, nothing wrong with it. But what is the source of it? Where is that coming from? Is it
right.
human grade or is it feed grade? If it's feed grade, that's where you're getting diseased, disabled, dead animals that
Yeah.
you don't really want your animals to eat that. So
Right.
that's where it's coming from. So when you see that in your pet food, and we don't do this, I don't think anyone does, call the manufacturer and say, what is your source?
Yeah.
Right? But there's another source, right? You can go to Susan Dixon's list of approved foods. She has a list where she's gone through, if they do third party manufacturing, so they don't know what's happening with their food, the sourcing of the food, if it's human grade, if it's organic. And you can choose from that list. There's kibbles, there's raw, there's lightly cooked, there's canned, there's all sorts of this kind of food.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny that your dog started barking at the same time mine was barking. I muted myself, but then she started again. She's a little further away. It's okay. It's a pet podcast. We have people, they're like, I'm
Sorry.
reinforcing what you say. Don't feed me those beaks and feathers. And
I
and
think
to your
it's good. Just where
yeah,
are they
but
coming from?
well, not only that, but it's like, okay, if you had the option, so rather than thinking of them as equal, would you rather hand your dog a plate full of nice chicken breast or beaks and feathers on a regular basis? Probably would like to have some of that meat in there. Okay, I want to get back to this idea because I'm thinking about the sardine thing, and I'm thinking, well, that's simple enough. You get your sardines, you have them in the, once they're open, you have them in the fridge, boop, 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 one on each bowl, and it becomes part of the habit or part of the routine. And I think that's maybe one of the biggest challenges for people is changing that routine. I mean, one of the things I joke about, which I joke about it, but it's actually sometimes true, is there have been times where I'm in such a hurry and I have so many dogs between my own and the rescues that I have literally taken a big thing, a scoop of food, taken everybody out to the patio and just here you go, and threw it on the ground. And they tend to, based on their size and their mouth size, for whatever reason, it seems to work that everybody gets the right proportions. Maybe close. I mean, I don't do that often, but, and that, I know that's an extreme example. You're probably like, oh my gosh. But, it's just people need simplicity, or they want simplicity.
Right.
And if it starts to get complicated, then it's going to be like, this is too much trouble, even though in your heart, it's not too much trouble. On one hand, you do anything for your pet. On another hand, am I going to cook for them every day? But what are some ways that we can start making that a routine? Or is there a way we can make the routine easier? Like, could we prep a bunch of stuff in advance, or freeze things and then just take the frozen stuff out in the morning and put it in the fridge and let it thaw? Like, what do you have any little tricks for us there?
Prepping is definitely your friend. But the
Hmm.
thing is, you do need to do this and make sure you're ready. For example, the sardines, I want to make sure that I do mention this. They need to be packed in water with no added salt.
I
If
was
you
going to ask
cannot,
about,
yeah, if you
yeah.
can't get them fresh, which I've tried here in Houston, I can't get them fresh. So I need to order them online because I can't find them without salt. But if
Mm,
you just take them out, you know how many you're going to give, and you have them ready in the fridge just to do, like you said, blah, blah, blah. Everyone gets their share, and it's that simple.
mm-hmm.
For the cooking of the food, a lot of people are like, I don't even cook for myself. Like, I don't even know what to do for dinner every day. They
Yeah.
are easy. Like, you put all this stuff that is really good in a crock pot. The crock pot
Mm,
is overnight for 8 hours. You don't even need to touch it. So the only thing you need to do is cut it, put it in the crock pot. Next day, that's ready. You put the oil in it. Then you cut it into batches of how long it takes. It's 5 days, right? So that it's not rancid and it stays fresh. You
yeah.
freeze the rest. And then it's like you're pulling your kibble. You just take it out, you take a scoop, you serve it, you put your sardine, off you go.
Mm-hmm.
It's as simple as that. And then you pull out the frozen one for the next week. And so
Yeah.
it's really not that hard. Prepping
Okay.
for raw food is very similar, except that you just need more space in your freezer and your fridge, because you can just do it by meal and put all the pieces, the muscle meat and the bones and everything in there, and then just have each meal ready. You just need more space.
Yeah. Um, I had written down a question, and as I look at it again, I think that's kind of a dumb question, but I'm going to ask it anyway about choosing fresh versus processed. I mean, because the manufacturers tend to make it seem, it's healthy. They use all this verbiage that makes us feel like it's good enough. But I hope by now we all know that whether it's for ourselves or our pets, that fresh food is better than processed food because of the processing process itself, and because of all of the other ingredients that we don't need to take into our bodies, and neither do our pets, that make it shelf stable or box stable, or
Right.
whatever it may be. But to give people a little more motivation, like, what is the long-term impact of feeding processed foods to your pet? Because oftentimes you don't see it for years, or people will say, well, I fed my dog, and I won't name any brands, but I fed my dog this bag of garbage and he lived to be 12. And I'm thinking to myself, well, he probably could have lived to be 16 if you'd have done this, or he wouldn't have had itchy skin, or he wouldn't have had that, so what's the
Right.
impact of bad processed food versus
The
whole fresh food?
question here is, again, it depends on the pet, but the
Mm,
bottom line is quality of life. Because, yeah, some people do well, they survive in processed food, right? They
true.
go to 12, they go to 14. But like you said, were they in pain? Because sometimes they're survivors, right? They come from the wolves. They don't tell us much until they're really suffering. Were they
Hmm.
itching all the time? Were they having bad breath and having infections? Were they having loose stools and diarrhea? Like, are they really thriving? So what is the cost? We are seeing a rise in chronic disease.
Hmm.
So we're seeing dental issues. We are seeing kidney disease. Cancer is rampant. Like right now,
Huge.
all dogs are getting cancer. One out of three or one out of four dogs are getting cancer. And if they're older than 9, it's almost like 50 to 60%. That is
Wow.
the cost. So you're saying, I don't want to spend too much money on food and he's fine, but then you're going to have to pay the vet bill that is going to be constant for your pet that now has a lot of chronic issues, right?
Yeah.
Obesity is a huge issue now
Yeah.
because they're eating basically French fries and, McDonald's every day.
Yeah,
They're just
that's a good
eating.
point. I mean, if you think about it that way and say every time that I'm making this choice versus this choice, or I'm not taking opportunities to put the good choice in, it's kind of like if you were going to take your children or take yourself to McDonald's 3 meals a day, 7 days a
You can
week,
live,
300.
right?
Yeah, I
You
mean,
can
it's
live. You live a
you'll
long life.
survive, but you're not thriving, and
You're
you'll
not
only
thriving. You're
survive
going to
so
have
long.
heart disease,
Yeah,
like our pets. You're going to have arthritis. Exactly. So you'll survive, but are you thriving?
right,
And the
right.
age of our pets is declining too. They used to live longer.
Mm, yeah.
That
Well,
that that's the cost of not investing in your pet. And the vet bills are just through the roof right now. And then they give you those prescription diets. Then why don't you just cook for them? It's cheaper.
yeah. Good. Yeah, good point. Good point. So it's like you think you're saving now, but you're going to pay the price later. And so is your pet, who has no choice in the matter. So, making some of these changes is definitely something we should all look into doing. So I know you talked about Lumiere and, the improvements that you saw in changing his diet. Do you have other examples or stories of kind of, because you're a coach, and I do want to talk about coaching and how that all works, because we're sitting here, we're having this conversation, and people are probably listening and thinking I can do that, but then they're going to because I know it's happened to me. You're going to start doing it, and then my first thought was, but I've got 4 dogs. They're not all mine, but I feed 4 dogs every day. Do they all need the same thing? Probably not. Do they all have the same issues or needs or whatever? But let's get to that in a minute. But what are the success stories that you have experienced?
I love the stories of the pet parents that tell me that their dog. So I'll give you a couple of examples. There is
Hmm.
one, he's a Yorkie, 8 years old. His name is Choco. Choco is a beautiful Yorkie, and his mom was starting to be annoyed because he was losing hair on his ears. Yorkies are supposed to have this luscious, beautiful hair
Yeah.
everywhere. And his ears were bald. So he looked like a bat. His mom would say he has bat ears. And he was starting to get some patches of, and he was overweight. But the vet would say, well, that's normal. He's 8. The hairs that we start normalizing those things. We start
Yeah.
telling ourselves, well, he's 8. He's starting to lose his mind or his hair, and it's fine. And the vet gave her a I can't say the name of the brand, but it was
Yeah.
specific for Yorkies, which I find hilarious because food is food. And it didn't work. He just
Mm.
gained more weight. After it was 20 days after he was in the food that I gave him, his hair started growing. And then she said, but it's not just the hair. He looks amazing. And everyone stops and says, what are you giving Choco? He's beautiful. But it's also his energy. He's acting like a puppy again. Like he's just having this energy. He lost a pound. Bear in mind, this is a 5 pound dog. So a
That's a
pound is a
lot for
lot.
that's a lot for a Yorkie.
He lost a
20%
pound.
of his body weight. Yeah.
Yes. So when he jumps, now he's just hitting himself with the table because he's just making the effort because he used to be so heavy. And so that's one of the success stories. Another one is I'm working with a lady that has 3 dogs. I'm working with 2 of them. One has Cushing's disease, and she
Mm.
is, I think, 12. Her name is Chloe. And there's also Jagger, he's 4 years old, and he had alopecia. The
Mm.
veterinarian said alopecia is normal. There's nothing we can do. And then Chloe with Cushing's, she needs to get her medication, and every so often you need to increase it. But we started the food specific for Cushing's. And she had pancreatitis, so we need to be careful with that. So we did do 2 different diets. Like you say, we can feed the same for both of them. So for Jagger, we did increase a lot of omega-3, so a lot of fish oil and sardines, and we worked on inflammation for him. And what his mom told me is she's like, he's getting hair. He's getting hair back and he doesn't have alopecia anymore. And then he said, and he's not as nervous or anxious anymore. And he loves his food. He just seems happy. The Cushing's baby also, it's just the best thing is to hear they just seem more energized and
Mm.
happy and alive. Like you get the result that you were there for. Like the Cushing, we were working on the Cushing and she lost, she was losing some weight, so we worked on that and she's looking beautiful. but she looks happier and she has this energy to her and she's just acting like a puppy again. I love when they tell me they're just acting like puppies again. Another
Mm-hmm.
one, we were working because she had some arthritis in her hip. She had an accident before her name is Lola. And her mom says she's just mischievous again now. She was like this mischievous dog after eating I think she's been with me for a couple of months. She's doing better with the inflammation. So it's preventive for the hip, right? To make sure it doesn't get worse.
Mm-hmm.
But she's getting mischievous and happy and having like a different flair in life. So those are the stories. There's one story, and this is one of my fosters, and I have another story with my Felipe that we saw who's barking like crazy. And if we have enough time, you stop me. I can tell you so many stories, but I got this foster and we named her Lovebug. She was a Chihuahua. She was 9 years old and she was flea infested, absolutely flea infested. And her skin, of course, she gets an allergy and her body starts responding. Got rid of the fleas with medicine because, when you need medicine and you should use medicine.
Yeah.
But then I managed her itchiness and inflammation with just food and mushrooms. And she completely transformed. She was this beautiful. I have some pictures of her and some reels in my Instagram. And her hair was started growing. It was about 2 weeks.
Mm.
And the skin changed and she was just beautiful. Unfortunately, they took her away from me because I was feeding her food. So I
Mm.
couldn't foster her anymore. So that's one of those stories. Like, that is so sad. She was thriving, but they took her away.
Uh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we won't go down that path.
Let's
Yeah. But But yeah, I mean, it just well, but it's evidence, and I will say, coming from a rescue standpoint, obviously, if I knew my foster was a professional nutrition expert, then I would defer to her expertise. Sometimes when we have people that foster that decide to, I say they go rogue, like they. And I'll just
I
give you,
understand. Yeah.
I'll give you one quick example. We had a volunteer who was constantly asking questions about some issues that we had going on. And they were acknowledged issues and they were things we were working at the vet on. But she took it upon herself to change some of the routines. And one of the things that she changed was, rather than cleaning their bowls the way that we clean them, she started cleaning them with rubbing alcohol. And this is for cats. It's highly toxic to cats. So we don't like people going rogue. But I'm certainly open to alternative nutrition. But yeah, I mean, it has to be people that are experienced and understand the benefits of that. Otherwise, people can be sometimes kind of closed-minded about it. So I understand. Yeah, I kind of understand that. So, so you said these are clients of yours that you're talking about, other than the foster. How does that work with a pet nutrition coach? Like, I just, I know I do coaching of executives on how to communicate more effectively with their employees, but obviously that's a little bit different. So what exactly do you do with your clients and how does that work?
So it's pretty much like what you do, but instead of talking, I mean, I talk to the pet parent, the one that knows them best. What we do is we go through, there's different things that people need, right? They might have a chronic condition that they want to deal with, like, Cushing or alopecia, or they might just want to transition safely. And that
Mm,
takes time because they are sensitive. You can't just some dogs will do it and change and nothing happens to them, but some don't. And so
mm-hmm,
depending on what they want, we get together, we talk about it, and then I give them, there's a questionnaire where they would give me all their information about the pet.
mm-hmm,
One of the things that I like about being a coach is that it's very personalized and do sit down and learn about the dog or the cat. What are the
mm-hmm,
issues? It's a time intensive process. I then take that questionnaire and put together a very detailed plan to go through on how to do what we're going to do, whether it's fight inflammation or fight a chronic illness or just transition. We get together, we talk about it. It's very important that the parent is very involved because they're the ones who know it and they're the ones who are executing the plan.
yeah,
And then we adjust because, like you said, you give them something and they might not like it. Especially our kitties, they might not agree with our plan. Some
yeah,
kitties would rather die than change their food no matter what. And
mm-hmm,
so we need to make sure that our pets agree. Most dogs do agree with our plan, and then we adjust. By the end of the process, it can be 2 months or it could be 3 months, depending on the complexity. then you walk away with 3 complete recipes, all the supplements if necessary, or I prefer to give fresh food instead of supplements if not necessary. So how do you supplement for omega-3s? How do you supplement for probiotics? And then they walk away with the knowledge of identifying the right food, the 3 recipes, and everything they need to be able to support their animals' longevity and health.
And is this something you're doing? Like, are you coordinating with their veterinarian? Are they just letting their veterinarian know what they're doing?
That is a
Or is it
very good
independent?
question. It's independent, and I usually tell my customers to make sure they tell their veterinarian. I am a true believer that it's a collaborative approach. Some people believe that holistic approaches and functional approaches exclude traditional medicine. I don't believe in that. I think it's a good combination of the two. Sometimes you need one, sometimes you need the other one, and sometimes you need both. So I
Mm-hmm.
do tell them to tell their veterinarians what we're doing. Some of my customers don't feel they should tell the veterinarian, and they tell me I can't tell him because he gets angry,
Mm. But
which
to
is
me,
a
that's more
shame.
of a sign. That's more of a sign that you maybe need to look at having a different veterinarian. I mean, it's, obviously
I agree.
if I'm saying I'm feeding my dog rocks in class, then yeah, I mean, I think your veterinarian should try to stop you. But I mean, it should be a conversation, and it should be a, well, here's why I believe this, and here's this, it's here's the science to back it up. I think that's a big piece of it too. It's like, it's not just my
It,
opinion, it's what's backing it up.
and I do give them all the tools to have those conversations with the
Good.
veterinarian because what I'm putting together is not something I invented. So the diet that I work with was created by a veterinarian who creates this, and it's approved by the American Veterinary Board. Like I just don't create in my house on my own. There's some
Hmm.
guidelines that we need to go through, and
Yeah.
we need to make sure that the right nutrients are being included. And so I give them all the documents and I tell them, talk to your veterinarian about it. The most important thing is to help them have a conversation with the veterinarian. Ask the
Yeah.
right questions because sometimes we don't know, right?
Right.
So that's what a pet health coach also does. It tells you, make sure you do this, make sure you ask this question, make sure you're comfortable with the answer to a specific question. Make
Yeah.
sure, you know what you're doing
Right.
because not knowing is one of the worst feelings, right? When my cat had pancreatitis, I didn't even know what caused it. And I didn't
Hmm.
even know what were the questions or what were the things to say or do. So
Right.
that empowerment is key as part of that coaching.
Yeah. And one thing I would add as somebody that has worked a long time with veterinarians, I consult and coach veterinary practices, is that, for those of you who are listening and you want to have these conversations with your veterinarian, um, create the opportunities to do that. Like, don't decide to have the conversation when you said, "Oh, I just want to come in for a nail trim with a vet tech," and then say, "Oh, Dr. So and so, can I talk to you for?" And then now you've taken an hour. I mean, that's why their schedules get messed up because oftentimes our veterinarians are too nice to tell you you really need to make an appointment. But what I would recommend is, whether it's part of your pet's annual exam or you want to make a special appointment with or without the pet to go in, pay them for their time because that's what they're there for, and then you can have a conversation about, here are the things that I'm concerned about, here are the things, I think that's only fair. It's kind of like me as a consultant where people will call up and they'll say, can I pick your brain? And it's like, that's what I get paid to do. I mean, yes, I'll let you pick my
Yeah,
brain to a certain degree, but after that, it's like when I'm basically writing your speeches for you and I'm now leading your employees for you, that's what I do for a living. I don't do it for free. So, show some
right.
some consideration for your veterinarian's time as well. And I think in those instances, they'll be better prepared to make time to have these conversations. And, if I said to my vet, hey, I really want to sit down and talk about blah 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 that's going on with my pet. I am considering doing this with his diet. Can we have a 30-minute appointment to sit down and talk about that? And that way they've got time to prepare and maybe do a little homework as well. So just that's
I
just Amy
think, and
Castro's
I
two
think that,
cents worth.
yeah, but that's a very good point. Just have a conversation with your veterinarian. If they're not willing to be open
Mm,
to what you want to do with healthy food, then, like you said, it's a good time to look for another veterinarian.
yeah.
But for the really good veterinarians who are open, who are really looking to learn more about this, you will find that they'll be curious and they'll be interested in knowing what you're doing
Yeah.
and they'll support you. I do have one customer that said I had one veterinarian and I couldn't talk to him about it. But then I
Mm-hmm.
went to the other one and she read what I was feeding and she was like, yeah, I'm okay with this. I'm okay with this. Perfect. Keep me in the loop.
Yeah.
That's the difference between the veterinarian you don't want and the veterinarian that you do want. Because
Right.
you want them to know what you're feeding them because they're the ones who are going to be treating your pet.
Yeah.
So yeah, communicate.
Yeah.
More often than not, they will be open to listening to what you're wanting to say.
Yeah. And I think, and I don't know if younger people have this much of an issue, but I know that that older people sometimes, we were raised to have this reverence for the person in the white coat, right? So you don't question the doctor. And it's like there's a fine line between questioning them, like I'm questioning your judgment, and asking a question. So if your veterinarian were to say, I don't think you should do that, just say, okay, can you share why? Or can you tell me why? Or can you explain a little more about that? I mean, it's okay to ask why. And then you can make your fully informed decision that way. But, just saying, okay, my vet said no, or my vet said I shouldn't do that. And because I've asked people this, people that are calling me to surrender their pet because it's got an issue that they can't fix. And I said, well, have you talked to your vet about this? Yeah, I asked them about that. And they said, don't do that. I said, did you ask why? Well,
Right.
yeah, like they're afraid to ask. It's like, just ask. You're paying them. It's okay.
Exactly. Exactly. And if you're seeing your pet doing better with the good food, then
Hmm.
there's even more of a reason to ask, why should I not give it? Like, why? What is
Right.
wrong with it? I'm not
Right.
hurting it, obviously, evidently.
Yeah. So you had mentioned a resource. Susan, what was the last name again?
Dixon, I
Okay.
can share the link for
Okay.
you to look at the
We'll put
list.
the link up for that. Are there other things that we should be, I mean, other than going to her website and looking at her list of pet foods, or hiring a nutrition coach like yourself, which we'll put your contact information up for people who want to talk with you more. What else can we do to be getting this true information? We're reading the back of the labels. We're going to try to identify what those things are and what they actually do. What else do you suggest
A
for us?
couple of things. You can always Google everything, right? And you're going to find a different answer depending on what you want.
Right.
But you need to know your pet. So know what really works and doesn't work for your pet, and then go a route and try and get the person who knows in that area better, right?
Mm,
Don't go with trends and don't go with the last thing that you saw on Instagram because even though those things could be true, it might not apply to your specific pet. So
right.
make a decision of what you want to do. Are you feeding raw? That's fine. Then look at people that are doing it. Canine nutritionists they're all over. You can go to Feed Real. In Feed Real, you can do a course to learn how to not to be a nutritionist, but to learn more about nutrition. You can
Hmm.
hire a canine nutritionist or a pet health coach. You can go to a website of someone that tells you Feed Real, Dr. Ruth Roberts, do two websites where you're going to find pet health coaches, canine nutritionists that know what they're talking about.
Okay.
Here in Houston, I run workshops that talk about it teaches you how to read pet food labels. And then we
Okay.
talk about different issues. We did one at Bark last Sunday where we talked about sensitivities and allergies, the difference between them and how to help your pet overcome both.
Mm-hmm.
Other times we talk about, the superfoods, or I do different topics and I've done them online and I'll do them in person as well. So go to workshops.
Yeah.
Don't just follow the last trends and don't give up also because like you were saying earlier, I gave them all that. It didn't work. So I just completely went back.
Yeah. Any, and one of the things I was thinking about too, and I don't know if do you know the folks from Zoomies?
I do. Yes.
Okay.
They actually, they hosted one of my online workshops a
I
couple of
thought
weeks ago.
so because I was like, you didn't mention it, and I was like, I thought I saw, but I didn't want to bring it up and be like, no, that was somebody else.
So that was me. Yes.
Yeah. So we did, yeah, we did an episode with them as well, and I'm definitely looking forward to when they officially open up. They're doing so much in advance. That's really cool.
It
Uh,
is pretty cool. And he wants to do this kind of thing, education. So I'm looking forward to support that mission and present my workshop to his community.
Definitely. Well, Elizabeth, thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. I love the idea of having a pet health coach to really help us through this process. And the way I always figure it is either you can Google it and spend hours and hours and hours, or you can go to an expert source and get that person to help you. And it's probably a better use of your time, but that's going to be people's choices. But we'll put
Exactly.
all your contact information up for people. And again, just appreciate you being here with us today.
Amy, thank you so much for having me. And I'm just hoping I've given some information for people to understand that it's not that hard. Start with 1 tablespoon. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to me. I'm
Awesome.
very happy to support you.
Awesome. And thank you to everybody that listened today. You know, I challenge you because I think about the things that we spend our money on, because a lot of times it comes down to finances. This is too expensive. That's too expensive. But, you know, if you're willing to give up your 1 cup of out of the house coffee or that energy drink that you probably shouldn't be drinking anyway, and you added the cost of that up over the course of a month, I bet you anything that you could make some of these better improvements to your pet's diet. And wouldn't it be worth it if you could add quality years to your pet's life? So please consider that. And thank you again for listening to another episode of Starlight Pet Talk. We will see you next time. Thanks for listening to Starlight Pet Talk. Be sure to visit our website at starlightpettalk.com for more resources, and be sure to follow this podcast on your favorite podcast app so you'll never miss a show. And hey, if you like this show, text someone right now and say, I've got a podcast recommendation. You need to check this show out, and tell them to listen and let you know what they think. Don't forget to tune in next week and every week for a brand new episode of Starlight Pet Talk. And if you don't do anything else this week, give your pets a big hug from us.